here's something that might surprise you. The first recorded Christian convert in Europe wasn't a religious scholar or a spiritual seeker, but a successful businesswoman who dealt in luxury purple fabric. Her split-second decision changed the course of Western civilization.
That's fascinating, and what's really interesting is how this whole story starts with what looks like complete failure. These missionaries keep hitting wall after wall. How does that lead to such a pivotal moment?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. You've got Paul and Silas literally being blocked by the Holy Spirit from preaching in Asia and Bithynia. Like, imagine getting divine GPS directions saying recalculating over and over.
Hmm. So what you're saying is that sometimes what looks like rejection is actually strategic positioning.
Exactly. And here's what's wild: historical records show that purple cloth merchants like Lydia were essentially the equivalent of luxury fashion moguls today. We're talking about someone who had serious social and economic influence.
Oh, wow. So when the text mentions she was a seller of purple, that's actually telling us a lot more than it seems on the surface.
Right, purple dye was worth its weight in silver. At the time, it took about 12,000 shellfish to create just 1.5 grams of pure purple dye. So when this wealthy, influential businesswoman immediately opens her home to these traveling preachers, that's a huge deal.
The way you put that really highlights the contrast between walking in the flesh versus walking in the spirit, doesn't it?
You know what's fascinating? Archaeological evidence from Philippi shows that the riverside where Lydia was praying was actually a significant distance from the commercial district. She was literally going out of her way to seek spiritual truth.
Well, that adds another layer to the story. She was already positioning herself for this encounter, wasn't she?
Exactly. And here's something else that blows my mind. Historical records suggest that women in Philippi had more rights and independence than in many other Roman cities. So Lydia's ability to make autonomous decisions about her household was actually pretty unique for that time.
That really puts her immediate response in a different light. She was using her unusual freedom to make a bold choice.
And speaking of bold choices, the Greek word used for constrained when she invites them to her home implies persistent, almost forceful hospitality. She wasn't just making a polite offer, she was insisting.
So, what you're suggesting is that true spiritual transformation should actually look more like Lydia's immediate responsiveness than our careful, measured approaches?
Yes. And here's the kicker: the text says she and her household were baptized. Scholars estimate a wealthy household like hers could have included 20, 30 people. Her decision had ripple effects through her entire community.
That's really making me think about how we often try to separate our spiritual lives from our practical decisions.
Well, consider this. Lydia's house became one of the first churches in Europe. Recent archaeological findings suggest these early house churches could accommodate 50, 70 people. So her spontaneous hospitality literally created space for the gospel to spread.
The implications of that for modern spirituality are pretty massive, aren't they?
They really are. And you know what's fascinating? The letter to the Philippians, written later to this same community, is Paul's most joyful letter. This church that started in Lydia's home became known for its generosity and spiritual vitality.
So, in essence, what began with closed doors in Asia led to opened hearts in Europe?
Exactly that. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson here. Sometimes our biggest setbacks are actually setting us up for unexpected breakthroughs. Just like those closed doors in Asia ultimately led to an open door in Lydia's heart, and through her, to the heart of Europe itself.